Well, tomorrow, the U.S. Supreme Court will hear one of the most watched cases of its current term, one that originated in Montana.
It started with a small state tax credit and has morphed into a national battle over the constitutionality of public aid to religious schools.
MTN's chief political reporter Mike Dennison begins our coverage.
Espinoza versus the state of Montana had its beginnings 5 years ago with the passage of a $150 state income tax credit for donations that ultimately funded scholarships for students at private schools. But the Montana Revenue Department said the tax credit funded scholarships could not go to students at religious schools because Montana's constitution forbids any state support of any church. Kendra Espinoza and two other parents whose children attend Stillwater Christian School in Kalispell sued. They're represented by the Institute for Justice, a national organization that defends public aid to private schools.
When I was denied the scholarship for my girls, I felt it was very discriminatory, very unfair, simply because they went to a religious school.
The Montana Supreme Court ruled against the parents and threw out the entire tax credit, saying it violated the state's constitutional ban on government aid to churches. The Institute and Espinoza appealed that ruling to the U.S. Supreme Court and are asking it to strike down that portion of Montana's constitution. As they argue in their brief filed with the nation's highest court, this court should reverse the Montana Supreme Court's judgment and hold that government cannot bar the choice of religious schools in student aid programs, whether through a bigoted constitutional provision or otherwise. This holding would allow Montana's scholarship program to continue and also remove a major barrier to educational opportunity for children nationwide. The case has drawn national attention. More than 30 groups supporting religious schools have filed briefs for Espinoza. Montana's two Republican members of Congress, U.S. Representative Greg Gianforte and U.S. Senator Steve Daines, also filed a brief opposing their own state in support of allowing aid to religious schools. But more than a dozen groups, including some congregational churches from Montana and Wyoming and the Montana Association of Rabbis, are siding with the state. They say the ban actually protects religious freedom, and that's what the state argues too.
We think the First Amendment has, for the entire history of our country, rejected this idea that public funds can be coerced and sent into particular religion's education.
Graybill also says breaking down that wall in Montana's constitution could harm public school funding.
And if that protection for public schools is gone, which is what the petitioners are asking the Supreme Court to do in this case, there are very few roadblocks left that prevent a future legislature from taking that public school funding formula and allocating it directly to private schools.
But State Representative Bill Mercer, a Billings lawyer who co-represented Espinoza in state court, says he thinks that fear is overblown.
Could the tax credit be increased? A future legislature could do that. That is true, but we all know that in the state of Montana, public institutions delivering K through 12 education are central, important.
The U.S. Justice Department under the Trump administration has also weighed in on this case for the parents in Kalispell and against the state of Montana and its constitution. Reporting from Helena, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
All right, thanks, Mike. Now the Supreme Court will rule on the case later this year.